Thank you very much for joining us today from around the world to discuss new procedures and policies for the electronic certificate of pharmaceutical product. It is indeed the right momentum to discuss this topic, which is evident from the high interest today's webinar raised in the international regulatory community. With over 1,600 registered participants, which includes several hundred regulators from a number of countries worldwide. We hope that today's discussion will help clarify outstanding questions you might have and improve practices related to the use of CPP and eCPP, ultimately supporting joint efforts of industry and regulators to accelerate access to medicines and vaccines for patients worldwide. It is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations, IFPMA, and its CPP network. My name is Nevena Miletic. I work in the Global Regulatory Policy in Roche, and I am currently chairing the IFPMA CPP network. CPP network gathers industry experts on this topic. Our objective is to support best practices and raise awareness of the purpose of the WHO certification scheme, its applicability and opportunities of the use of CPP and its alternatives such as approval letters, GMP certificates, or public assessment reports in the registration and lifecycle management of medicinal products worldwide, also in the context of regulatory reliance establishment. For years, we collaborate very closely with WHO and many CPP issuing health authorities towards CPP scheme modernization. Namely, CPP was established several decades ago, as you might know, as the first reliance tool. Its intention was to be used as an assurance of the quality, safety, and efficacy of the concerned product, and as such substitute its partial or full quality, safety, and efficacy review by requesting health authorities. During the years, the use of CPP was varying from the initial intention, but it remained one of the main documents used to support new submissions and subsequent lifecycle regulatory activities in international countries. Its role has been further clarified and emphasized in the recent WHO regulatory guidelines published in 2021. For example, in its good regulatory practice policy, WHO explicitly lists CPP as a reliance tool and stipulates its use in lieu of full or partial quality, safety, and efficacy assessment. On the other hand, with the increasing number of CPPs required for regulatory submission, generating an administrative burden for both regulators and industry, one step in the modernization of the CPP was also seen its evolution towards an electronic CPP, eCPP. This was further emphasized during the COVID crisis, both for the regulatory agencies that issue and those that request CPP. The need to maintain this critical service of CPP issuing prompted regulators to start implementing eCPPs in line with WHO certification scheme and also in line with relevant electronic signature regulations, and others also started accepting this form of CPP. Considering changes introduced and experiences gained, also in the recent IGDRA 2021 recommendations, eCPP, e-signatures, and digital submissions are listed as best practices introduced during the pandemic that should also be maintained in a post-pandemic setting and become the new normal. With all this in mind, we invited today our esteemed speakers and panelists from WHO, European Medicines Agency, MHRA, and EDA to share the considerations related to the use of eCPP, their experiences, procedures that they have implemented or plan to implement to ensure harmonized and consistent approach, and to provide opportunity to respond to outstanding questions or concerns you may have related to these practices. With their outstanding support, as well as thanks to all of you who decided to join us and take part in this event today, we are looking forward to the important information sharing and productive discussion during today's webinar. I want to encourage you to use this opportunity to interact with our speakers and panelists, raise your questions and comments using the chat function, and leave the event with a new knowledge, but also with ideas and action plans on how you can improve the procedures in your countries for the benefits of patients. Lastly, as this event was jointly developed by regulators and the efforts of three sister industry associations, IFPMA, FPA, and Pharma, I would like to use the opportunity to thank all the IFPMA, FPA, and Pharma colleagues for the close partnership in the organization of this event. And with this, I would like to invite Gio Krishnan, FPA Director of Regulatory Drug Development and Manufacturing, to present you the objectives of the webinar. Thank you. Gio.
Thank you, Nevena. Good day, everyone who have joined us from world over. As Nevena just said, with over 1,600 participants, we're excited to bring this joint webinar to you all as part of IFPMA and Pharma. So at the outset, I would like to thank all my colleagues from IFPMA and Pharma for this great partnership in the organization of this very important webinar. I'm Jo Krishnan. I'm working in the regulatory drug and manufacturing team at the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations in Brussels, in Belgium. Now, as you've all seen, this webinar is about new procedures and policies that are available for issuing the electronic CPPs. And CPP is a key document in regulatory processes in emerging markets. Since the pandemic, some reference authorities like the EMA have started a digital transformation journey and have introduced new procedures for issuing these electronic CPPs. These have been introduced, of course, because of the pandemic situation, but there is indication that these will remain effective for the rest of the time. Now, WHO has also updated their certification scheme on the quality of pharmaceutical products moving in international commerce and have introduced new recommendations. So thus, there is a need for promoting awareness of the new global landscape for the electronic CPP, just so that we all can avoid disruptions to supply and enable easy access of medicines to our patients. IFPMA and FPA had conducted a survey in September to November 2021 from their regional networks to understand the acceptance of eCPP by different regulators around the world. What we did see was there many authorities were accepting eCPP. However, some were open to accepting it during the pandemic and requested paper CPPs at the end of the pandemic. However, much more concern was that many authorities were not aware of the online verification tool system that has been provided by EMA to authenticate such documents. Thus, FPA, IFPMA, and Pharma have foreseen an opportunity, like Nevena mentioned, to collaborate in this webinar, and we hope that the current challenges could be addressed in this open dialogue and further clarification could be produced by our reference authorities. Thus, the objective of the webinar is to present and discuss the new policies and practices and trends in the issuing of the CPPs, the eCPPs, and their use during and after the pandemic. And it is also to promote a reflection from the industry and the regulators about the need to adapt local practices as needed and to rationalize and streamline the use of CPPs and eCPPs. The agenda, as you can see on this slide, will include a presentation from WHO's team about their recommendations. We will also have presentations from authorities about their new practices and policies for issuing eCPPs. And without further ado, so you can also have an interactive panel discussion following those presentations, and then you can also interact with using the Q&A chat box, as Nevena had already mentioned. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to the moderators of this webinar, which is Pedro Franco, Director from Global Regulatory for Science Policy from Merck Serono, and Camila Gomez, the LATAM Regulatory Policy Lead from Roche. So Pedro and Camila, the floor is yours. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Jo. And I would like to ask the audience to use the question and answer box to send your questions during the presentations. These questions will be answered during our panel discussions. And now I would like to invite Dr. Samuel Azatian from WHO as our first speaker. Dr. Samuel is a pediatrician with a PhD in clinical pharmacology and the medical products regulation. He has been working at WHO for more than 20 years. He had a wide range of leadership roles associated with regulation, medicinal products, including supporting regulatory collaborations, conversions, and harmonization, as well as a regulatory capacity building and facilitation products introduction in countries. Dr. Samuel has also led various projects aiming development of regulatory systems. Dr. Samuel is currently leading a regulatory conversion network team at the Department of Regulation Pre-Qualification at WHO. Dr. Samuel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pedro. And I would like, first of all, to thank IFPMA and FPA and all other organizers for this good opportunity for us to present and to have also feedback from various parties that are interested in better understanding of what is certification scheme and how it could be used. So next slide, yes. So what is the WHO certification scheme? As it was mentioned already by Nevena, this is perhaps one of the first instances when the reliance in regulatory area has been introduced as a practice. It was proposed at the time of its establishment as just an administrative tool for regulatory authorities to exchange the information about medical products. And it is based on voluntary and non-binding agreement between the parties involved, and also on self-assessment of the regulatory capacity of issuing regulatory authorities or national competent authorities, as we call them, in the context of this scheme. So the intention of this scheme was to facilitate trade of pharmaceuticals of assured quality, safety, and efficacy, and also at least to try to hinder or limit the circulation of substandard or falsified medical products. Next one, please. Just a little bit of history of certification scheme. Maybe starting from mentioning that WHO, as you know, is not a supranational organization. It is an international organization, one of the technical agencies of the United Nations organization, and it has been established in 1948. So the mandate is to develop norms and standards and to support countries to implement these norms and standards in their national settings. And just to address this mandate, in 1963, the governing body of WHO, which is the World Health Assembly, has issued a resolution 16.23, which was calling for examining the ways and means of ensuring that the drugs exported from a producing country comply with the drug control requirements which apply in that country for domestic use. Which means, if you translate it in a human language, it was for this scheme to provide assurance that if any country is importing a product from a country X, just to make assurance that the product is well registered and recognized in the exporting country. So in a way, it kind of to give assurance to you that even the country that has exported this product itself is regulating this product properly, and there is a system in the country that can assure that the product is of good quality. So this system, the certification scheme, has been evolving over the years because it's a kind of a living document. In 1969, so you see, this is so long time ago. Many of us were not even existing at that time when this scheme was proposed. And sometimes we are speaking about reliance as something new. So reliance is not new at all. It was existing even, before we appeared on this world. So in 1969, another resolution of the World Health Assembly, 2865, has established also good practices in the manufacture and quality control of drugs and the certification scheme on the quality of pharmaceutical products moving in international commerce. So this was the start of so-called GMP and the start of certification scheme. Next one, please. The scheme was further improved and revised in 1975, where the regulatory status of product in exporting country was also added to the provisions of the scheme. and also the issue of GMP compliance of manufacturing site. In 1988, another revision happened, which was about active ingredients and veterinary products used in food producing animals. So critical aspects of regulation of medical products, and also product information and labeling. And lastly, in 1992, more or less the current version has appeared, which is still in use, and it has been fully operational since 1997. With some little modifications and additions, this version is still in place. And just to mention that when World Health Assembly or our other fora like expert committees on specification of pharmaceutical products, they approve any document, then they approve in technical report series in a compendium of decisions and recommendations, proceedings of the expert committees. And this one specifically was in TRS, Technical Report Series 1033, but it has been published not for full implementation, but as a proposal for discussion. Because the scheme, as I have mentioned in my first slide, has been proposed by the World Health Assembly. And in WHO rules, any document that has been proposed by the World Health Assembly can only be alerted or changed or revised and further updated and approved only by the same level of authority, which is again the World Health Assembly, which has not happened in this case so far. Next slide, please. So how countries participate in the scheme? So far, we have more than 150 countries out of 194 WHO member states already participating in the scheme. So how it happens? It is really voluntary, as I mentioned also in the previous slides. So any member state that wishes to participate in WHO certification scheme just need to notify our Director General about their willingness to participate in the scheme. So it's by notification. And then each member state, when they join the scheme, they assume the responsibility to determine through the process of self-evaluation whether they are satisfying the prerequisites to participate in this scheme. So there is no external audit mechanism for WHO or for any other party to go to the country and check whether their intention to participate in the scheme is supported by appropriate regulatory capacity. So it's by their own self-evaluation and also declaration of their conformity. So the scheme, therefore, contains no provision under any circumstance for external inspection or assessment of the regulatory authority that is becoming party of this scheme. Next one, please. So far, this is what I mentioned. We call them competent authorities in WHO scheme. We have now 150 WHO member states plus European Medicines Agency as a regional entity participating in the scheme. And the list of competent authorities in alphabetical order is available on WHO website. And it is publicly available, so anyone can see this list. But when you see this list, you will be surprised, I promise, because you will see that many of the countries, those who have joined the scheme many years ago, they have not updated the information about their competent authority, and the information could be absolutely outdated for many of them, because for some of them, the information comes from 1980 or even before. So you can imagine how many times that maybe the authority has been changed, or the title, or the name, or the address, or the responsibilities. So this list is just for a reference, but it is not 100% accurate in terms of the details of competent authorities. And we are now embarked in the process of revising this list. So I will address this in my future slides. Next one, please. So there are some advantages and limitations of the scheme. first of all, the advantage is that, and again, remember that it has been proposed in 1960s when there was the best communication media was a telephone and maybe facsimile machine, which was maybe the only sophisticated equipment existing at that time. No internet, no email, and so there was a need to have some sort of a standardized format defining information to be provided, and also the mechanism that would allow this information interchange between different parties involved when this scheme was actually used. And so there were also, of course, some limitations. The participation in the scheme was based on self-declaration of conformity of issues. So there is no way to check how good they are, the certifying authority, which means that the certificates they issue they are as good as the certifying authority, because there is no mechanism to screen certifying authorities. Next one, please. And so these limitations were always pushing WHO and our member states and other partners to think of further improving the scheme. And since 1969 until 2022, you can imagine the regulatory arena has dramatically changed. The whole context of the use of this scheme has changed. When we look back in 1960s, in 1969, when the scheme was actually put in place, there were few exporting countries for pharmaceutical products. Most importing countries had weak or no regulatory system. And this was a situation when many exporters, which were not really very honest or scrupulous, they were taking advantage of this poor information and communication. So they were doing what they want. And now what is the situation in 2022? We have many more exporting countries for pharmaceuticals. Communication is fast and easy, and information is also very easily exchanged and accessed. And most national regulatory authority now asking for real things, the dossier, not just the certificate, but the dossier, because in the past, of course, they were also asking dossier, but not many of them were not able to evaluate this dossier. Now the situation is slightly different. And of course, in this context, now the application of the certification scheme becomes even more and more challenging. And somehow we have to mention that CPP, original CPP, has lost its value. So it absolutely needs to be changed and to evolve. Next one, please. So the scheme was subsequently reviewed also in October 2020, as it was mentioned by Nevena. And again, when the scheme is revised, it has to go through at least two rounds of public consultation, where our member states and all other concerned stakeholders have an opportunity to provide comments. And following that rounds of consultation, we have revised the scheme in 2020, and that has been submitted also to the expert committee on specifications for pharmaceutical preparations for approval, for discussion and approval. And there were some main changes in the scheme compared to previous revisions. First of all, also to address what was coming as suggestion or request from the users of the scheme. And so these are those important aspects, not all of them, but just few. First of all, the lead time of the certifying authority, can be sometimes very long. You request for certificate and you don't know when you will receive it. And there was a call for certifying authorities to establish a standard time frame, ideally not more than 20-30 days for them to respond to the requests. Also, many importing countries still require legalization of certificates, putting some sort of additional stamps and so on. And this is understandable because, again, this is sometimes in the regulations and legislation in the country, and it's not easy to change it overnight. But overall, there was, of course, an agreement, a consensus that considering also all of these recent changes in the information exchange and availability of various other means of verifications, legalization should not be any more requested. But this is a propose and to gradually move to the situation where it will not really be any more requested. And there are also some inconsistencies in the trade name of the product between the importing country and the certifying country. This is something which we have been discussing also very recently with our industry colleagues with IFPMA in the context of the sameness of the product for the use in the context of WHO collaborative registration procedure or other facilitated regulatory pathways. We know that sometimes the same manufacturer is marketing the same product under different names in different countries. And so again, but in case of reference, then the importing country, the recipient country, is willing to have the same name in the dossier for the product that they are receiving. So we agreed also that the model template of certificate for pharmaceutical products should be revised so that a proposed trade name in the importing country could be also stated in addition to the name in exporting country. And the statement of marketing authorization, it is also something that creates still a lot of confusion. And it was previously the Appendix 2 of the scheme, of the guideline to the implementation of the scheme. And it was also an agreement that the statement of marketing authorization should be removed to simplify the scheme because it has not been used anymore in most instances. Next one, please. So another important thing that we have to also mention in the context of this discussion is that, as I said, the regulatory environment is rapidly changing. And there was a trend since last decade or even more to speak about good regulatory practices. And WHO was working with its partners to develop a series of guidance documents. One of them was good regulatory practices, which was also adopted in 2021. And so we now can understand the situation which is existing now in the countries, and we could agree perhaps that it is not anymore possible for all countries to be able to build the same type of regulatory systems which will be able to perform all key regulatory functions at the highest possible level. This is perhaps possible for some selected countries, but not to all of them, and not to majority of the countries. And this is understandable because it is linked to the existing resources. And we understand that also the things are changing, and we also see that now the tendency is that more and more regulatory authorities are seeing themselves as part of the network rather than as an individual regulatory authority attempting to do all the work alone. And NRAs, national regulatory authorities, absolutely need networking, work sharing, collaboration, convergence, all based on reliance to eliminate duplication of work, which would help them also to liberate some important resources which they could focus on other things which should absolutely need to be done locally. They can't delegate it to someone else. For example, to assist manufacturers in their own countries to achieve and adhere to the standards of GMP, also to control importation and domestic distribution, functions such as pharmacovigilance and product information. These are also something that cannot be delegated to others. You should do it yourself. Next one, please. So good regulatory practices concept has been very instrumental in also helping us to understand what should be the strong NRA, national regulatory authorities, and how to avoid being weak national regulatory authorities. And the characteristics of these two are very clear now. weak national regulatory authority is the one that works in isolation, attempting to do everything alone, duplicating the work that has already been done by someone else. It has a very serious risk of achieving some contradictory outcomes with practically no defined benefit for public health. And of course, this is not at all an optimal use of scarce resources, which are always limited. And it also considers or contains a higher probability of substandard products and limited credibility within the health system, because then no one will trust your system if you are not able to fulfill your responsibilities. And what is the strong national regulatory authority in the context of GRP in 2022 now as we speak? It is the NRA that is networked with other regulatory authorities, learning from each other, pushing and pulling, focusing on necessary tasks based on proper identification of the risk, which also means that there will be less probability of substandard and falsified products to be present in your market, and which on its own will increase the credibility of the regulatory system in the context of overall health system in the country. Next one, please. So, but another important development is, you know, that we were having a system which was called stringent regulatory authorities. You remember those were parties of International Council of Harmonization, ICH, and very limited in number. Now the situation is changing. As you know, ICH is also evolving, that it is now more open to also involve other countries from different regions. And there was a strong need of also refining this whole concept, because it has very strong implications also on not only on the regulation as such, but also on the global procurement of medical. In WHO, there were discussions, and we came to an agreement after discussing it with our member states that there is a need for establishment of a new system which will be called WHO listed authorities, which will come to replace the previously existing concept of stringent regulatory authorities, or SRAs. So this process is now ongoing, and we have already progressed quite a lot in this area. And what will be the WLAs, or WHO listed authorities? These are expected to be very strong national regulatory authorities, effectively networked and collaborating with other regulatory authorities, and absolutely those who are investing in regional international collaboration. So being good in your own national context is not anymore enough. You can be considered as WLA only when, in addition to your strong regulatory capacity, you are also involved in networking and also in international regulatory collaboration to support the concept of reliance. Next one, please. And of course, we were all very happy to do all these changes and this evolution, but then suddenly COVID-19 pandemic arrived. As a big surprise, although it wasn't really a surprise, because we were already aware that pandemics will be coming also in the future, and this COVID-19 is not the last pandemic that came. There will be absolutely other pandemics in the future. So how for us to be able to address this pandemic, we should also look at this from the point of view of international collaboration and information exchange. Even before pandemic, we had already some discussions with some of the regulatory authorities, and first of all with the European Medicines Agency, and you will be hearing after my presentation from my colleague Alberto Ganan from European Medicines Agency, and we were discussing with Alberto, with his colleagues, even before COVID, on how this whole extreme workload of issuing hundreds and thousands of certificates on a paper could be changed, how this habit could be changed to more using modern information technologies and digital technologies to do the same work. Because it's okay when you issue 1 certificate per day or 10 certificates per day, but it's not good if you issue hundreds of certificates per day, especially in the context of ongoing pandemic, when all the communications were interrupted, no post office, and so on. And so this is the title of this slide. I was thinking of changing it to something that I proposed also in previous discussions. How to make impossible things possible. And this was really a good opportunity for us to see that things can overnight change. Things which were not considered as possible yesterday, suddenly today they became possible because the situation was telling us to do so. And this was exactly the same and true for digitalization of a certification scheme. And in the recent revision of certification scheme by WHO, there was also a consideration or recommendation that based on a good example from European Medicines Agency, MHRA UK, Health Canada, some other agencies that are also in this process currently, that we should no more issue paper certificates, but we should go to more electronic certificates or using secure electronic signature processes or other processes which would help us to verify the genuinity of the certificate. And WHO absolutely supports this process. And national regulatory authorities receiving certificates in the context of WHO scheme are also urged by WHO to accept electronic signature. It is not easy. We understand that sometimes you need to change your regulatory requirements to allow you to do so, but this would be a great example of regulatory flexibility, which is needed in the context of public health emergency, in the context of current pandemic, and in the context of future pandemics to come. Next one, please. So the way forward, what we do now to improve this scheme. First of all, as I mentioned, TRS 1033 is not for implementation. It is for the discussion, and after the discussions will be finished, it will be submitted to the World Health Assembly, WHA, for endorsement. And to do so, in WHO, we are establishing a working group, which will consist of representatives of different stakeholders, including NRAs and other industry and other parties involved, to lead the process of revision and finalization of the scheme based on the feedback from our member states and other stakeholders. We have already received a number of comments, suggestions. It will be all considered, and we don't exclude another round of public consultation to do this revision. And the aim is to submit for final endorsement by the World Health Assembly in May 2024. It's why not in 2023? Because usually the agenda of World Health Assembly becomes full already about 1 year ago before the meeting. So we are late for 2023, but hopefully by 2024 it will be okay. And we have now a plan for revision of the scheme, which, as I said, which will also include survey to verify the contact details of national competent authorities participating in the scheme. And this is very challenging task, and WHO would strongly rely on all of your commitment and also collaboration with us to help us to respond to the questions that you will be receiving from WHO one by one, to verify and update the information about your country's competent authority as it is presented on WHO website. It is in the interest of all of us. Next one, please. And this was my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samuel, for this very nice presentation, very insightful presentation. I would like just to remind that now we have our interpreters with us please click on the globe for French, Spanish or Portuguese. Nous avons notre interprète. Pouvez-vous appuyer sur le globe pour avoir l'interprétation en français? Ahora tenemos nuestros intérpretes. Haga clic en globe para obtener la interpretación en español. Ahora tenemos nossos intérpretes. Por favor, clique no globo para a interpretação em português. I'd like to remind the audience that all questions will be addressed during the question and answer sessions at the end of the webinar. Please, you can write your questions in all language in the question and answer box, and we'll raise during our panel session. And now I would like to invite Dr. Alberto Ganan Jimenez from EMEA as our second speaker. Dr. Alberto Gagnan is a pharmacist and holds a PhD in molecular and cell biology from University of Zaragoza. After working in the pharmaceutical industry in business intelligence, Alberto joined EMEA in 2006 as a product team lead. He was appointed as a head of procedures office at EMEA in 2013. This office was responsible for ensuring our CPPs and as well validation of different applications. Since last month, he has been appointed at interim of head of committees and quality assurance department at EMEA. So Alberto Gagnan, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pedro, for your introduction. And I would like to thank IFMA, FPA, and Pharma for the organization of this webinar. I think it's really interesting and is an excellent platform to reach many authorities and many people worldwide that are using eCPPs and CPPs, and to share the agency practices and policies for issuing them. So if we go to the next slide, we live in a digital world. Digital transformation is in the European Union one of the key priority areas that both the European Commission and all institutions are working on. And the electronic certificate system is part of this digitalization that we are currently ongoing. Electronic certificates, it's a new way of issuing certificates of products, and we have to say that it has many advantages. Samuel in the previous presentation has already highlighted many of them, but I can confirm that having electronic CPP increases the efficiency because it allows issuing authority to more efficiently issue certificates and shorten our timelines. I mean, the agency is currently issuing certificates within 4 or 5 days after receipt of a request, which is really good. And we have also a very fast transferring to the applicants because we send them electronically with no need of courier or postal. It also has a very big advantage is that we are we are helping the environment. I mean, at the moment we are all very worried about our environment, and this is an initiative that supports going green, the reduction of paper and also our waste. Since March 2020, EMA is moved to a system where we only issue electronic CPPs. We had been working for this digital transformation before, but it was the pandemic who triggered us that we had to move to a system only issuing electronic CPP. And the main reason was that we wanted to avoid any business disruption when we didn't have postal services and where people were in lockdowns. And we wanted to ensure that importing authorities would not be affected because of the agency not being able to issue paper copies. So when we moved to this initiative of only issuing electronic certificates, we contacted different stakeholders and we approached the WHO, who provide a great support to our initiative. They not only supported it, but also recommended other regulators to consider similar approaches in order to ensure that there were no business disruption. And also they urged authorities of importing countries to accept these electronic certificates. So I have to say that we had very good collaboration and very good support from WHO on the initiative. If we go to the next slide, please. So since March 2020, the European Medicines Agency has issued more than 30,000 eCPPs, coming from more than 13 requests from companies, and they have been issued for approximately 136 different importing authorities all worldwide. At the agency, we have not received any communication of any CPP to be refused or not accepted by any importing authority. Therefore, we can conclude that the eCPPs issued by EMA are widely accepted by most regulatory authorities of importing countries. As mentioned before by Nevena, I mean, there are different expectations from some authorities in importing countries about the need of providing paper copies at later stage, for example, after the pandemic. At the European Medicines Agency, we have already changed all our procedures and our systems, and we do not issue any paper copies anymore, and we will not be able to issue them. The moving digital is something that the agency has pioneered, but many other authorities have also implemented or are considering. Therefore, this is a real change in the way we are issuing certificates of medicinal products. Therefore, it is really important that all the authorities of importing countries, all the authorities that receive the eCPPs, adapt their systems from the technical point of view and also their legislations for accepting the electronic certificates issued by EMA or issued by any other authorities worldwide. So this is currently the way that that EMA is doing, and at the moment we are only, as I mentioned, issuing electronic versions of CPPs, not paper anymore. If we go to the next slide, our certificates, the electronic ones, follow the WHO certification scheme. So therefore, when we move from the paper copy to the electronic copy, there was no change in the content or in the way that the certificate looks like in terms of format. The only thing is that instead of having a paper version, what we have at the moment is a PDF document on an electronic format. But the information that is included is the same, and it follows totally the recommendations by the WHO and is widely accepted by all authorities participating in the WHO certification scheme. It provides a comprehensive assurance about the quality of the medicinal product, its manufacture, control, without the need to provide any additional information to the CPP. We have published a document, which is the EMA guidance, where we explain all the different elements that the eCPPs issued by EMA follow, and as I mentioned, that they are in line with the WHO certification scheme. So you can find in our website information about the information package that our eCPPs have. If we go to the next slide, please. So the electronic CPPs, as I mentioned, mainly differ that it is a PDF document that contains an electronic signature. This electronic signature complies with the strict regulation of the European Union towards electronic signature. It is valid for all legal documents in the Union, and we have full reassurance that the signature is linked to a person and that it has only been created by this person under his sole control. So it really guarantees the signature from the specific person authorized to sign. Another of the important elements is that after the PDF has been signed electronically, any manipulation unauthorized or unlawful can be detected. And when it is opened by any PDF reader document, any PDF software, it always appears a signature panel where it provides full confirmation that the document has been signed and that it is valid. Therefore, this electronic signature provides a high level of assurance of the integrity of the electronic certificates. I would have to say that from my point of view, it provides much even further reassurance than the printed versions, because here any manipulation can be easily detected by any software reading PDF documents. Therefore, we can fully provide that the document that reaches to the importing authorities has its full integrity since the signature at the European Medicines Agency. If we go to the next slide, one of the concerns as well from importing authorities has always been whether a document is totally authentic. So the European Medicines Agency launched an online verification system where authorities can verify that the document has been really issued by the European Medicines Agency. So they can fully check that the document is authentic and has been issued by us. All eCPPs contain a certificate number and a request number. Both numbers are unique to that document and are really linked to that document. There is no other document that contains both identifier numbers. So when an importing authority or any interested party goes to our website, to our authenticity verification online tool, they can type these two numbers. And if we go to the next slide, our online verification tool will provide certain details that will provide full assurance that the document has been issued by the European Medicines Agency and that is totally valid. So upon inclusion of these numbers, you will receive information of for what importing country has been issued, what is the medicinal product name, when has been issued, who was the person that signed it, and whether the signature is valid and the document is valid. So all these details are fully sufficient to verify that the document has been issued by the agency and is fully authentic. We always have this information timely available, and normally all certificates that we issue on the day can be verified in our online verification tool as of tomorrow. So we provide full reassurance to any receiving authority that they can verify their documents from the day after they have been issued. If we go to the next slide, please. So with both elements, the electronic signature and the online verification tool, we fully guarantee that the eCPPs remain its full integrity and its full authenticity during and from the moment we issue until the moment they reach you. We have explained in an information note all these safety elements and the use of this online verification tool, and you can find all information on this information note that it is displayed on the slide. And we have also prepared a YouTube video, which I really encourage all of you to follow, where in 5 minutes we explain all the safety features and we explain how to use the online verification tool. So if you are part of a regulatory agency receiving eCPPs, I would encourage that you just watch this video because you will have a full overview of all the safety features of the document. Having said that, we are also aware that some importing authorities still require further legalization of printed copies of CPPs or even the electronic CPPs. We consider that this requirement is fully unnecessary and is not a practice that is supported by the European Medicines Agency and as well by the WHO. We have launched this online verification tool, and we have established this electronic signature in order, as I mentioned, to provide you full guarantee of the integrity and authenticity of documents. Therefore, we consider that there is no need for any further legalization of the documents. They are documents already issued that themselves provide full characteristics in terms of integrity and authenticity. So having said that, I would like to advise that any importing authority that still require may consider in future updates of their legislation to change this kind of practice, that we consider really unnecessarily and that really do not provide any additional warranty of integrity and authenticity from the features that we have. If we go to the next slide, please. I have to also mention that at the European Medicines Agency, we have a dedicated team that is responsible for issuing all certificates worldwide for human medicines and also for veterinary medicines. And we have an email address that you can find in your slide. So until we launch this online verification tool, this email address was used for some authorities in order to confirm the authenticity of eCPPs via email. EMA normally replied this request within 2 days, very quickly. So at the moment, we really encourage that you use our online verification tool because it's the fastest way to check the authenticity of certificates. But if you have any query related to certificates, please do not hesitate to contact the certificates team at the European Medicines Agency. If we go to the next slide, please. So EMA has been very active in supporting a worldwide implementation of the electronic format of CPPs. As I mentioned before, we have had a very close collaboration with Sambel and his team and with WHO. And we have also quite an active role in sharing our experience with other authorities that have been interested in issuing electronic certificates only. And we have also shared with them our challenges and the problems we issued in order to implement this system. The agency has also been very active in communicating to receiving authorities. So our colleagues from the International Affairs team sent some letters to more than 70 receiving authorities, urging them to implement the necessary changes in your systems and in your national regulatory legislation in order to accept the electronic certificates. And we have also provided some letters in different languages, English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese, explaining our system so that you can have full details of how the agency issues certificates electronically. So finally, I would like to highlight the main messages from us is, and if we go to the next slide, EMA will only issue electronic certificates. We are not going to issue printed versions anymore, and electronic is the permanent and only format of issuing them. I strengthen again the same message that the electronic signature together with the online verification tool provide full warranty of the validity, authenticity, and integrity of the certificates issued by EMA. If we go to the next slide, further legalization of documents, we consider that is unnecessary and is not a practice that is supported from our part. And we really recommend those authorities that still have not revised their legislation or that require some technical changes to undertake them in order to ensure the full acceptability of electronic certificates. The EMA pioneered on this initiative, but as we have heard already during the session, other authorities are also issuing electronic certificates, and there will be many more that will come. This new format allows a much faster transfer of information, and in a digital world, this is really key. And therefore, it is important that we are prepared for this future. So thank you very much, and I'm very happy to address any questions during the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Alberto, for this very comprehensive and informative presentation. I'd like to remind the audience that the questions will be addressed during the questions and answer session very soon. At the end of the webinar, I would like to invite you to leave your questions in the Q&A box. And I'm very, very happy to introduce to you our third speaker, Dr. Mariam Ali from the Egyptian Drug Authority. She has a bachelor degree in pharmaceutical science from the Faculty of Pharmacy, Cairo University, and she's among the EDA members, currently Biologics Inquiries Unit Manager in the Registration Administration of Biological Products at BioIn. She has worked in the pharmaceutical and biologicals industry for the past 9 years with many positions in the regulatory affairs sector. So Dr. Mariam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Camila, and thank you for inviting us to this important webinar to exchange knowledge about electronic CPP and to share our lesson learned from using electronic CPP. Thank you. Our presentation will cover 4 main important points. Next, please. Next, please. The first one is the importance of CPP in context of approval of medicines in Egypt, the factors that triggered implementation and acceptance of electronic CPP in Egyptian Drug Authority, and the outcome of using electronic CPP, and finally our recommendation to other CPP requesting authority about electronic CPP. Next, please. According to regulation in Egyptian Drug Authority, CPP is a mandatory document for registration dossier for all imported products, as it summarizes all the relevant data regarding the product. The presence of CPP ensures that the authority approval is based on full evaluation of product quality, safety, efficacy, and that the product is marketed in the country of origin or CPP issuing country, which is a mandatory for products submitted for registration in Egypt. And CPP ensures that the product is manufactured under good manufacturing practice condition and give us information about all manufacturer of the product, trade name, concentration, presentation. Next, please. It is required for new product submission, certain variations and renewal of license, and it should be submitted at the beginning of review. Next, please. Next, please. Factors that triggered implementation and acceptance of electronic CPP in Egyptian Drug Authority, that during COVID pandemic and due to lockdown, many authorities started to issue CPP with electronic signature to maintain this critical service. And the legalization process takes more and more time as the embassies didn't work with full capacity. So the processing time of CPP could range from weeks to several months, and legalization add more and more time. And patient access to new medicine is the real impact of this delay. Next, please. So the pandemic introduced challenges for regulators and the whole industry, as it forced all process to be digitalized. And as mentioned, that in March 2020, EMA announced that it would no longer provide a printed certificate, and only electronically signed one will be issued to enable EMA to continue this critical service. And EMA considers this way is the permanent way for issuing CPP. And the WHO agree with these initiatives and recommend other regulators issuing certificates to consider this approach too. And authority offer and provide us with a different verification system through mail, so with the official website to verify the authenticity of the certificate. Next, please. And as long as the legalization not part of WHO scheme and the official governmental authority will sign the certificate, so legalization doesn't add value to the certificate. It only confirms the signature, not the data of the certificate. And so in Egyptian Drug Authority, we decide to update our regulations, which request original legalized CPP and start to accept electronic CPP as long as there is a verification tool or system, we can check the authenticity of the certificate from issuing authority itself. Next, please. Outcome of using electronic CPP that it allow us and allow other CPP issuing authority continuous availability of CPP during the COVID pandemic. And the change from paper to electronic certificate will improve the efficiency of issuing CPP, reduce the time taken to issue and legalize, and so reduce the time for submission of registration dossier, and finally allow faster access of new medicine to patients. Next, please. And it allows quicker, easier verification from the issuing authority itself, and reduce the paper submitted for us as a CPP requesting country, which will improve the work environment and match with sustainability approach and the digitalization era. And some authority will offer advanced electronic signature, which is linked to the data sign, so any changes will be detectable. Next, please. So our recommendation to other authorities requesting CPP start to accept electronic CPP without need for legalization as long as there is a verification system or verification tool or communication channels with the issuing authority itself, and to the CPP issuing authority that still issue a printed certificate to change and transfer to electronic CPP to increase the efficiency of issuing CPP. And this was my last slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marian. Very insightful presentation and clear recommendations on the practical life, on the practicalities, right, of the use of the CPPs and the electronic CPPs by a health authority. So I'd like to remind the audience to put your questions in the chat, and we're now ready to start our panel discussion. And we would like to ask our panelists to open their cameras, and I would like to invite some other panelists to join us as members of the panel now. First of all, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Asif Janjua from the Medicines Health Regulatory Authority of the United Kingdom. As the head of process licensing and device registrations of MHRA. He joined MHRA in 2007 and has several roles in regulatory operations delivery before becoming the head of processing licensing back in 2017. So under the function, his team executes the operational delivery of the CPPs, also manufacturing wholesale distribution authorizations and API and broker registrations. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Management. I also would like to invite you to welcome Dr. Virginia Rojo from the European Medicines Agency. She's a pharmacist with a master's degree in pharmaceutical industry. She's originally from Barcelona in Spain and has worked in the pharma industry for more than 17 years in regulatory affairs departments in different companies, local and global functions. And in November 2020, she joined the EMA as a scientific specialist in the procedures office, working in Barcelona, London, Copenhagen, and now she's based in Amsterdam. So I'd also like to invite Pedro to join me to moderate this Q&A session. And please continue to add your questions to the Q&A box in the Zoom. So maybe I can start And my first question goes to Dr. Azachian in WHO. You mentioned something in your presentation already, Dr. Azachian, but can you just further expand on for the regulators that conduct full independent reviews of dossiers of quality, safety, and efficacy? What is WHO recommendation when it comes to the use of CPP or eCPP? And are there any recommendations regarding the legalization and apostille for these eCPPs?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Camila. I think this is a very important question. And again, it is in the context of the most recent advances in developments in the area of medical products regulation. Now, with the development and increase of the pool of the regulatory authorities which are able to conduct full assessment of the dossiers that they receive, it looks very illogical for them also to request CPP, which is a quasi information for them, because if they are able to assess more sophisticated information, why they should be requesting less sophisticated one? So WHO's recommendation, and this was also in the context of our discussion at the expert committee, is that those authorities which are able to do this sophisticated work, they should not be asking for certificates. However, we understand that this could be also part of their national regulations and legislation, and so they can't just stop doing it. It would require maybe some legislative and regulatory changes in their framework, which would otherwise would see that they are not doing what is in their legislation. Over.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samuel. And now we have a question for EMEA and Asif about how safe is the eCPP application. What kind of safety measures are applying to avoid fraud? Can authority contact EMEA and MHRA's CPP team? I understood that from a presentation of EMEA, they can directly to the email. And can we provide assigned CPP hard copies if required for some authorities? So Alberto and Asif, so the floor is yours.
I think I'll jump in there because I think Alberto has already covered some of this stuff in his presentation. In terms of how safe is the eCP procedure, so from an MHRA perspective, the eCPP is saved and issued in a secured PDF document. And this document does not allow the applicant to edit the document because the way we save it in a secure PDF document. And we don't actually have a database relating to eCPPs. So I'd say that we're pretty much safe on that front. We have an online register that we've started to use now, which will be a secure PDF document, which will not have edit permissions, where people can go on and verify the authenticity of the eCPPs. In terms of contacting the MHRA, we have an email inbox, exports@mhra.gov.uk, which is looked at daily. We answer queries within one working day on that inbox. We also have a telephone line, which we can pass on after the webinar. It's 0203-080-6593. That's manned every day, Monday to Friday. Sorry, Pedro, what was the other question?
I think you cover about, can you provide signed CPP hard copies if required by the authority?
Yeah, so I think the MHRAs, so we're going down the road of, just like the EMA, we're not providing signed copies. So we're not going to be providing signed copies of CPPs, but if local authorities want us to verify the eCPP, they can contact us via email or use our online register. And we've not issued hard copies like the EMA since March 2020, and we've issued over 13,000 electronic CPPs, of which 30% of them under our urgent service. So we won't be issuing any more hard copies, no.
It's very clear. Thank you, Asif. Alberto, would you like to complement anything from your presentation on this question?
Yeah, I can respond this one. But basically Alberto already covered most of it. So just to say that the electronic certificates comply with the European regulations on electronic identification and trust services, as it's called, eIDAS, I think it's called. And we explained that we have a lot of explanation in our website. In the verification tool, there is also a leaflet where you can check all the different regulations that the electronic certificate complies with. And yeah, as Alberto mentioned, of course, is a PDF that cannot be interfered with, and you can check the signature panel. And through our verification tool, you can also check with the requesting number and the certificate number that indeed was issued by the EMA. And similarly, we also have an email address where authorities can contact us in case they still need further reassurance.
Thank you very much, Virginia. And another message for all regulators that are listening, neither EMEA nor MHRA will issue hard copies. Thank you very much, Virginia. So the floor is yours, Camila, for the next question from the public.
Thank you, Pedro. You have been observing the Q&A box and also some of the questions that we received before the webinar. They were touching some of them. I would say most of them were clustered around legalization, right? The legalization of CPPs and legalization of electronic CPPs. So my question goes both to Samuel and Dr. Marian, and maybe from different perspectives, right? First, from the WHO perspective, what are the recommendations and what are the statements, if you can clarify to our audience about the legalization of this type of document. But we also know that it is the reality that some countries require. It's not up for the regulator to decide about the legalization or not, or apostillation of those documents. So both from Samuel and Dr. Marian, I'd like to know what would be your views or your suggestions regarding this topic, so that countries can maybe continue to comply or be or maybe introduce some flexibility to the legalization or apostillation requirements without jeopardizing the regulatory assessment in terms of potential delays that this type of procedure might cause. So can you please do some assessment of what would be the recommendations from WHO and from a regulator that recently waived this procedure to other regulators across the globe?
Yeah, thank you, Camila. I will try to address this question from two different angles. One, when we speak about the classical, traditional way of issuing CPPs, the one on the paper, then of course, in this case, legalization looks like a logical step, because anyone can fabricate a paper CPP on a copy machine, you know, now with the technology, so you can send anything to the country, and how they will make sure that this is a genuine certificate, if it is not legalized, if it is not coming through diplomatic channels and so on. So one way of avoiding legalization would be, again, just to use modern telecommunication technologies. If you receive a certificate where you have doubts about its authenticity, you just pick up the phone and call the issuing authority and ask them with the number and even the shape and appearance of this certificate, whether they have issued such a certificate, which you have doubts about. This is a way to address it. But of course, our main discussion is about legalization of electronic certificates, which is absolutely meaningless, because if the electronic certificate is designed in such a way that it provides assurance of its authenticity by definition, by the features of the system, like in the banking. When you do electronic banking, for example, you put your own consent to do it and to use it, and no one really contests that the challenge is existing, although there are challenges. There are always challenges. There is no 100% foolproof system existing in the world. But you have to also understand the risks and the workload involved. So if the electronic system that, for example, in EMA provides these beautiful features, which are allowing you to have very, very high level of assurance that the certificate is indeed genuine and there is no risk in using this certificate. So why you didn't need a legalization? Legalization of what? Of electronic certificate. I mean, this to me looks a bit illogical. And so, of course, And what I think Alberto has perfectly described, the system they have already in place, which to me is absolutely sufficient. If I would be a recipient in my former life as a regulator, I would have no doubts about these certificates. I would just accept them, even with more assurance than any paper certificate. Over.
Dr. Marion, can you please just comment on your experience?
In addition to what Dr. Samuel mentioned, that as long as there is a verification tool or system from the issuing authority itself, so there is no need for legalization of the certificate, as long as I can verify the authenticity of the signature and of the certificate from the issuing authority. So we need to update our regulations that need legalization.
Perfect. And I see that Dr. Alberto maybe wants to complement.
No, thanks. No, I'm really pleased to have heard the experience of Dr. Marian Ali from EDAS. When we designed the online verification tool, the main reasoning while we were doing that is just to avoid the further legalization and the apostille and to provide full assurance of the authenticity. So we are aware that some importing authorities have already changed the legislation or are in the process to, but we are really pleased to have seen your experience really from an importing country perspective, because really it gives the value of that initiative that we intended. Really, it has really been fruitful. So just to complement that, everything that has been said, we fully subscribe. So here probably is just to pass the message to other authorities to also may consider to follow the same kind of approach and adapt their systems and their legislations in order to support the authenticity and the integrity of the CPPs. Thank you.
Thank you, Alberto.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. I think it's a good message for everyone about the apostille. And now we have a question to EMEA, either to Virginia or Alberto. Recently, we learned that the EMEA is planning to introduce some changes in the CPP template to align with WHO model certificates. Will regulators receive a communication letter explaining these changes? With these changes, does it mean that activities which are mandatory to be listed as a part of CPP in some countries, such as registration of drug substance, drug product, bulk, primary, secondary packaging, batch release, won't be declared as usual in the eCPP? And are you willing to add any special annex with these informations? So the floor is yours.
Yeah, I can take that one. So we will be aligning with the new WHO template. And yes, indeed, we will be communicating that to all the pharma industry and to the receiving authorities once we have a date, because yeah, we will take a date, and from that date onwards, we will be issuing according to the new WHO template. So once we know the exact date, we will be sending communications to pharma industry receiving authorities so everyone is aware. We will be fully aligning with the WHO template. So of course, manufacturing activities will be there as they are in the template. I think in the new template, they are just described with the letter A, B, C, D. There is a list of letters with a list of activities. So any activity that is included in the WHO template, we will be including that in the certificate upon request from the pharma company. Is only activities that are not included in the WHO template, then for those companies will need to request them specifically to be included and justify why they need to be included. We just assume that all the activities that are included in the template are the ones covered by the certification scheme. So we will be aligning to that, and our systems are aligning to those particular activities.
Super. Thank you very much, Virginia. Camila.
I have another question here to Dr. Azatian. It's about the requesting authority. Can a requesting authority ask the issuing authority of the CPP or the eCPP to include additional information to the document? And are there any WHO suggestions or guidelines on specifically the content of the CPP that both authorities should adhere to?
Thank you very much, Camila. This is not advisable against the whole spirit of the scheme and the logic of the scheme, and, because this information is available in the dossier anyway. So if you are asking for this same information in the dossier and in the certificate, then it becomes redundant and it becomes an extra challenge for the issuing authority to include this information in the certificate. I know that some countries are still attempting to do so, but this is against WHO recommendation. But unfortunately, as I mentioned in some of my responses, we have no supranational power. We can't force countries not to ask this type of questions. But we just, when people ask us, then we always inform them this is against the provisions and the recommendations of the scheme. But we can't avoid having such questions from time to time. Over.
Super. Thank you, Dr. Samuel. And shall we just check with our colleagues, Amir and Dorothea, if there is any additional questions from our question and answer box? And you can raise to our panelists.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pedro. Can take it from there myself and Dorothy. So yes, we have received a couple of questions as well. So, and the first question is proposed to EMA and MHRA, I would say. So the question is, how is the electronic CPP rollout informed to the national regulatory authorities of other countries? So once it's there implemented, how is that being informed to NRAs? That would be the question. So perhaps we can take the answer from EMA first, maybe Dr. Alberto or Virginia, if you would like to add.
So the electronic certificate is already implemented. And we sent letters in English, Spanish, and French to pretty much every receiving authority. So all of them were informed of the change, and recently we submitted a new communication. We sent a new communication to them, just informing of the current status. So we have been trying to keep this communication line with receiving authorities open in case they have comments or questions. So yeah, is that answer the question? There was something else.
Yes, thank you very much, Virginia. So it's through the letters basically sent.
Yes.
And perhaps also, Asif, if you would like to add, is it the same procedure as well from MHRA?
Yeah, okay, so obviously when the pandemic kicked in March, we clearly communicated with all the health authorities and M8 marketing authorization holders, explained the new process and kept them informed. The way we did this is we put it on our website, but we also, with each electronic CPP that was issued, it was issued with a cover letter, and the cover letter contained important information about us using this new process of issuing the electronic CPP. And if there was any verification that was required at that time from March, if there was a new process that they could contact the team to get verification.
Thank you very much, Asif. Thanks for your input on that. So maybe we can, I can pass the next one to Dorothy.
Yes, sure. Thank you. So lots of questions. And just to mention that we won't be able to answer all, and it will be answered after the webinar. So we have received a lot of questions around the validity of the electronic CPP. So can I ask the EMI or the MHRA to answer this question?
Okay, from the MHRA perspective, an eCPP is only for one submission, so it's down to the importing country if they accept that electronic eCPP at a later date. So normally the importing country will ask for a new up-to-date eCPP for a new submission.
From Emma, maybe I'm going to comment. So the certificates that we issue are valid on the day we issue them. So we don't include an expiry date. We leave that for the importing authority to decide when they require to ask an updated eCPP. So the one comment, something that I would like to highlight is that Virginia mentioned that we will soon introduce some changes in our eCPPs to align with the latest format of the WHO, and we will take the opportunity to incorporate a hyperlink to our web page where any importing authority will be able to find the most updated information about the medicinal product in the European Union. So therefore, that will also support that if there has been any latest change in product information or in any kind of safety data, there will always have the link to the most updated information in case the eCPP is used at a much later date than when it was issued. Thank you.
Thank you. Turning over to you, Amira.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. So there's also another question, I think, which could be addressed to as well EMA and MHRA. So the question is if there is a justification or a declaration provided by the electronic CPP issuer to confirm document authenticity to avoid legalization. So basically, is there a declaration provided? That would be the question. Would you like to take it, Alberto or Virginia first?
Well, there is no declaration as such. Of course, the electronic CPP is electronically signed, and we have the validation tool where they can check that is indeed a valid CPP and has been issued according to the WHO scheme rules. So there is no separate declaration because we don't see the value of that. I mean, the CPP should be acceptable as is, and if there are questions on the validity of that particular CPP, the verification tool should give that reassurance. So there is no separate declaration provided.
Thank you very much, Virginia, for assuring that the validation tool could be used for that purpose. And perhaps Asif, if you have any input from your side as well.
Okay, from an MHRA perspective, so we wouldn't provide a declaration. What we have got is with regards to feedback from obviously regulators asking for authenticity and whether the CPPs are valid. We've created an online monthly register of the CPPs that we issue. Now this register is on the MHRA website, and the register contains such details as the certificate number, and so the unique certificate number, the importing country that's on the certificate, the date of issue, and the UKPL number, obviously if it's for a licensed medicinal product. And so the register is updated on a monthly basis. And at the start of the month, the certificates issued in the previous month and will be updated every month. So that's the process that people can use if they want to have a look at validating the certificates. If that's not good enough for them, then they're welcome to email in for further verification. Also, we've obviously started to issue our CPPs with the MHRA signatories, and these signatories are registered with the authorities of the importing country. So the signatures that have been used on the electronic CPP are registered signatories. So that should provide further verification.
Great, thank you very much, Asif. That's clear. So off to you, Dorothy.
Yeah, thank you. So I would like now just to ask a question to Dr. Ali. So from EDA, and we received some question around the health authorities from whether you accept eCPP from the EMI only or also from other health authorities.
Yes, we accept all electronic CPP without legalization, as long as there is a verification tool or communication channel with the issuing authority itself. We can verify the authenticity of certificate. So we accept all eCPP.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Amira.
Thank you very much, Dorothy and Dr. Mariam. And actually, the next question is also for Dr. Mariam Ali. So it's basically regarding the acceptance of the eCPP and implementation of it. So is there any challenges that you have faced throughout this journey, and how to deal with them?
Yes, in the beginning, our regulations request original legalized one. So after pandemic and after it changes all over the world, that we would change to digitalization era, and many authorities start to issue electronic certificate with electronic signature. So we have to decide to update our regulations, and that we do that we update our regulations and start to accept electronic certificates and remove the need of legalization, as long as there is a tool that we can verify from it.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Mariam. This is clear. So Dorothy, do you have questions at your side?
Yeah, I'm just trying to summarize a little bit. And if I may, can I go back? Yes, maybe on the timelines for getting eCPP, and as well, if I can combine, if you allow me as well, Amira, with just going back to what Dr. Gannon mentioned about when the WHO will update the new CPP format, how long time it should take from the eCPP issuing health authorities to also update to the new formats. So yeah, two questions about the timelines to get the electronic CPP, and when the format from the WHO will be updated, how long time it should take. Yeah. So I don't know who wants to answer.
I don't know, Virginia, if you want to complement or.
Yeah.
Well, just to say that from the EMA perspective, we will be adapting to the new WHO format, hopefully during this year, before the end of the year. We're working on that. If there is a delay, maybe early next year, but it should happen soon. And once we have a formal date, we will be communicating that. But we are aiming to implement the new format before the end of the year.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dorothy. So there is also another question here, I think also could be supported by Virginia and Asif. So the question is, are all of the electronic CPPs, or could all of the eCPPs be validated in the same website of the health authority, or it's not necessary?
So all the electronic CPPs issued by the EMA can be validated in the EMA website. Of course, the ones not issued by the EMA, they should be, is not going to be in the same website. It would be very complex to create a single harmonized website for all issuing authorities. It's not something that we're contemplating right now.
Thank you very much, Virginia. That's clear. So, and Asif, would you like to add from your side?
Yes, so obviously since the start of the pandemic, we've issued over 13,000 electronic CPPs, 13,000 of them. So we've recently started doing the register. If someone goes on and checks the register and their CPP is not on that register because we've recently started using that register and they want confirmation of validity since March 2020, then they can contact the CPP team. It might be something that I consider if we can upload up until March 2020 all the certificate numbers. I might look into that to get the register updated from March 2020 so people can check every certificate we've issued since March 2020. But at the moment, we've just recently started to introduce this register online just to help with the verification process. I think you also had another question about what service we offer in terms of timelines for eCPPs. So the MHRA currently have two services. We have an urgent service, which is 2 working days, which we charge £152 for. And so 2 working day turnaround. And we have a standard service, which is 10 working day turnaround and costs £68. And all our certificates are issued within these time frame guidelines.
Great, thank you very much, Asif. This is clear. Thanks a lot, everyone. So as we are behind a bit in time, so I propose that we hand it over to the next section. So Pedro, and first of all, thanks a lot to all of the speakers for answering all of the questions and for the great panel discussion. So I would hand it over now to Pedro and Camila to moderate for the rest of the agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Amir. Thank you, Amira, for the presentation. And now I would like to give the floor to our colleague, Patricia, to summarize all the questions. I'd like to thank all panelists for your engagement and to answer all these questions. Have been amazing to help our regulators worldwide about what we are doing here concerning DCPPs. And I'll give the floor to Patricia. Patricia, the floor is yours just to summarize the key takeaways today from our panel discussion and presentations. Floor is yours, Patricia.
Great. Thanks a lot, Pedro, and thank you, everyone. So to quickly present myself, I'm Patricia Salami, Regional Regulatory Affairs Head for a region called MEAR, Middle East, Africa, Turkey, Russia, and CIS, and Merck Healthcare, KGaA. And I have the pleasure as well to be chairing the Pharma, MEA, Middle East and Africa regulatory group, and to always work hand in hand with our other sister associations from IFPMA and EFPIA to better serve our regulators, our patients, and the population. So, dearest audience, on behalf of Pharma, EFPIA, and IFPMA, I would like to deeply thank all of you, and especially our esteemed regulators across the world who trusted us on this webinar, taking the time to attend, to listen, and to fruitfully contribute. Another big thank you goes to our esteemed speakers who shared with us a wealth of beneficial insights. And last but not least, to my colleagues across the 3 associations who I can assure you worked relentlessly to bring this webinar to life. Now, reflecting on today's forum, it is essential that we leave with some key takeaways and recommendations, which we maybe can summarize as follows. First of all, a CPP should be used as a reliance tool, providing assurance to countries participating in the WHO scheme about the QSE or quality, safety, efficacy of pharmaceutical products. Second, the use of eCPP during the COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated already that the concept is valuable and is paving the way towards broader implementation of eCPP. Now, third, the eCPP should be fully integrated with other digital systems used for dossier submission and review, including, but not limited to, e-signatures and electronic dossier submissions, rather than being handled as a standalone physical requirement. Number 4, additional legalization of the eCPP by the consulate or the embassy is highly discouraged, as we have heard as well today from our esteemed speakers, Dr. Samuel Azatian and Dr. Alberto from EMA. Why? Because appropriate international security standards for electronic signatures should be in place to ensure the authenticity of digital documents, including eCPP, with the recent optimal example being the tool established by EMA. And I'm not sure if it rang a bell your end, but it did for some of us, you know, the fact that an electronic handling of data can be even more secure than a physical one sometimes nowadays, as mentioned as well by Dr. Sampel and Dr. Alberto. Now, implementation of eCPP will support the increase in efficiency of regulatory system, being a recognized reliance tool for all stakeholders. And it will ultimately facilitate faster access to medicinal products to patients. And we all know that nowadays, and especially after what we have lived in the pandemic, that the word of the day is to be faster and to enable faster access to our patients for essential drugs, vaccines, medicines. So we don't want to have any document or step to hinder our enabling of these essential therapeutic solutions to patients. Last but not least, we have witnessed how EMA and WHO support a worldwide implementation of these electronic CPPs without the need for further physical legalization or authentication at an embassy or a consulate, giving us all the confidence in this scheme. So those were the, I would say, overarching 6 key takeaways for all of us to go home with and to reflect on before we further, I would say, if we are a regulator, discuss with our heads what to do, what to implement, and if we are as well, an industry, to make sure how we can help our regulators to access all the currently available data and to take well-calculated and reasoned decisions. Finally, as we all know, agility and adaptation are the key words for sustainability and success in our, I would say, ever-evolving today's world. Hence, the journey doesn't stop here, as we are looking forward to witnessing all respectful authorities to officially adopt the non-legalized eCPP scheme in their regulations. And we remain at all health authorities' disposal for further support and guidance as deemed necessary. It is worthwhile mentioning as well to our lovely audience today that a summary report highlighting the main messages of this webinar will be circulated to all participants in about the next 2 weeks. So for now, I would like to ask you all to enjoy the rest of your days or evenings, stay well, and to the next encounter. Thank you.